right, I'll call this meeting to order. Can I have a mover and a seconder, please? Deputy Mayor Coughlin and Councillor Ma, that the special meeting of the Council of the Township of Springwater of September 28, 2020 come to order at 4:02 p.m. All those in favor? Carried. Due to COVID-19, Council is taking the necessary steps to limit in-person meetings. As such, Council members will be participating in the meeting electronically, and the meeting is live streamed. Residents can either watch the meeting live on the Township website at www.springwater.ca. They can listen to the meeting from a telephone by calling 1-647-558-0588 and using the meeting ID 857-2476-6158 and the pound sign. This is available during the meeting, and for those unable to watch the live stream, they're encouraged to review the meeting at their convenience by watching the video on the Township's YouTube channel, accessible through the website. Council, are there any disclosure of pecuniary interests? Right, I don't see any. This special meeting has been called to provide Council with the opportunity to discuss the proposed licensing provisions for backyard chickens. Deputy Clerk Helmke will be making the presentation to Council with the assistance of Planner Chris Russell. Al Dam, the Provincial Poultry Specialist from OMAFRA, is participating in the meeting virtually and is available to answer any of Council's specific questions on backyard chickens. Council will need to follow the presentation that they were provided on their personal computers, as we will not be able to share the slides over the Zoom meeting. Deputy Clerk Helmke will advise when we're moving on to the next slide. Council members are also encouraged to ask questions that they may have throughout the presentation as specific licensing provisions are being presented. Please use your cards to indicate your desire to ask a question. At the end of the presentation, Council will then be voting on each of the recommendations that are addressed within the presentation and outlined on tonight's agenda. So I'll turn over the presentation to Deputy Clerk Helmke.
Thank you, Mayor Allen. I would also like to thank Chris Russell, our Senior Planner with the Township, for being present today to assist with any questions, as well as Al Dam from OMAFRA, who's taken time out of his busy schedule to be a resource today as well. Al has been a provincial poultry specialist with OMAFRA since 2005. He has experience dealing with all aspects of poultry production, humane handling, transportation, codes of practice, fly control, and small flock biosecurity, just to name a few. Al also teaches different workshops and webinars on all aspects of poultry and has been a resource for many municipalities across Ontario in establishing their own urban hen programs. So, hi, Al.
Hello.
We're moving to the second slide for Council. So to provide Council with a recap of the process that has brought us here today regarding backyard chickens, at the September 18, 2019 meeting, so a year ago, Council was presented with a report from the Planning Department regarding backyard chickens and options available to move forward. Council directed staff at this time to undertake a public consultation process, which included a survey and an open house, and then to report back to Council. At the February 5th, 2020 meeting, Council was provided with options on moving forward in permitting backyard chickens, or the option to maintain status quo, keep current prohibitions. Council was also presented with information collected through the extensive public consultation process. This included the survey results and additional comments made by the public at the open house. From this report, Council approved undertaking a limited backyard chicken pilot project for 3 years through a temporary use zoning bylaw and preparation of a licensing bylaw for Council's consideration. This is a two-part step because currently, under the zoning bylaw, backyard chickens are prohibited and the Township has no licensing provisions in place. These two steps are separate processes, but together need to be in place to permit the pilot project. It's a little bit of what comes first, the chicken or the egg. So this workshop is to review the key provisions of the licensing bylaw, and tonight's public meeting will deal solely with the temporary use zoning bylaw. This is council's opportunity to ask questions and discuss licensing provisions. So please feel free to ask questions throughout the presentations, as you will be presented with recommendations at the end for approval and to move forward with drafting the licensing bylaw. Moving to the third slide. So the key licensing provisions that we're going to speak about tonight is number 1, property size. Number 2, maximum number of backyard chickens. Number 3, license fee. Number 4, application for license. Number 5, Coupe regulations. And number 6, yard cleanliness and health and safety provisions. Moving to slide 4. So we're going to begin with property size. So staff's recommendation is that there's no restrictions on property size or minimum lot requirements to permit backyard chickens. There are additional options for council to consider. You can restrict by property size. So for example, Aurelia has a minimum lot requirement of 500 meters squared, and Quinte West has a minimum of 0.5 acres to permit chickens. So although it's being recommended that property size is not restricted, there are proposed regulations for coops that will restrict some properties from being able to have backyard chickens. The coop regulations are being proposed further in this presentation and are in place to reduce the nuisance to other properties and protect the health of chickens. If there's no questions on that, we're moving to slide number 5. Maximum number of chickens. So staff's recommendation.
Councillor, no, there is a question. 1 second, please. Deputy Mayor Coughlin?
Thank you, Mayor. And actually, I was just waiting for Councillor Cabral. I believe his virtual background was preventing his card from being shown. So, Councillor, I wasn't sure if Councillor Cabral had a question.
Sorry, Councillor Cabral.
Thank you, Mayor Allen. I did have a question, but I think I can wait until we talk about the specifications as far as distance from lot lines, structures, and whatnot. It does present some difficulty down the road. I don't have a question necessarily with lot size here.
Okay.
So I can wait. Thank you.
So we'll move on to numbers of chickens. Go ahead, Deputy Clerk.
So we're on slide 5. So staff's recommendation is a maximum of 4 backyard chickens, hens permitted per property. Roosters are prohibited, and all backyard chickens, hens shall be at least 4 months old. So 4 months old is a standard amongst all the backyard chicken bylaws that staff have reviewed. It's understood that hens don't start laying eggs until at least 20 weeks old, and hens are acquired prior to 4 months old. It cannot be determined whether the chick is a hen or a rooster. It also reduces the risk of people abandoning the hens when they are no longer, I guess, cute and fuzzy chicks.
Councillor Moore.
Thank you, Mayor Allen. Just a question for Mr. Dam. So how difficult is it for people to acquire 4-month-old chickens? I know when I had them myself, I had to get them as chicks, and then they grew sort of to a laying age. But is that something that's easily acquired?
So there's a number of providers of they're called ready to lay hens, right? Because at 4 months, about 20 weeks is when they become sexually mature. The reason a number of municipalities have discussed only ready to lay hens is that if you buy them from Pullets Plus or Bonnie's or Fry's, like those are the main providers for ready to lay hens, those hens will be vaccinated. We poke and prod those girls about 8 or 9 different times to give them all sorts of vaccinations to give you the strongest hen possible. You buy a day-old chick, you may have Merrick's disease and a bronchitis vaccine, and that's it. And chances are you're not going to be able to vaccinate them for anything else. So that becomes a potential disease. Those birds are more susceptible to diseases. Now, as far as availability goes, this has been a challenging summer because of COVID, right? Everyone wanted to get their pandemic pet, as I call them, because we had that point in time where we weren't able to get eggs, and it wasn't a supply chain issue. Like, it was just people were hoard buying. And Clarence Martin from Pullets Plus said he's never had it so busy. And he's, Is this a fad? Is this going to continue on? I guess we will see, but this is part of the reason why I've been doing many of these Zoom meetings over the last number of months. So yeah, as far as accessibility goes, they are accessible, but what happened this spring is that pullets plus bonnies and fries, they were sold out until September, like in April. And that was just the rush on demand for hens. But yeah, as far as accessibility, they are accessible. Yep.
Follow on, Councillor Moore?
Thank you, Mayor Allen. So my follow-up to that is, what do we do with the folks who don't want vaccinated chicks and hens? Is that because I think there's a lot of people who want backyard chickens because they want them to be, not vaccinated or not interfered with. Is that even a possibility or not?
From a reputable buyer, no. Because you're just increasing the opportunity for disease, and because these birds probably will have outdoor access, they'll get access to wild birds. Wild birds will have access to them, right? And this is not only a risk for the people who are raising the hens, it's also a risk for the commercial producers in the area, and it is potentially a risk to the other birds in your neighborhood. So
Yeah.
our recommendation is to not, like I said, yes, there are ways to get them, but not through our commercial dealers.
Okay,
It's
thank
not
you.
like playing with fire, as far as
Thank
that's
you.
how I look at it.
Yeah.
Councillor Cabral?
Thank you, Mayor Allen, through you. I know that when we were having some of these conversations earlier and some of the public comments that I heard, a lot of it had to deal with not only being able to provide, some fresh, nourishing goodness on the table from time to time, but also quite a bit with respect to the learning aspect that this would provide for younger children, not only from the aspect of looking after them and being responsible for them, but I just see there'd be missing a fairly substantial chunk of not being able to appreciate the growth of a chick to a hen. So I guess that would just be my question about that. But it does seem from what Deputy Clerk Helmke has said that no other municipalities permit chicks from chick age. They all have a specified age. Is that correct, Deputy Clerk Helmsley?
Deputy Clerk?
Through you, Mayor Allen, to Councillor Cabral, the ones that we have researched, it's 4 months old. Mr. Dam might be able to provide experiences from working with other municipalities, but the ones in Simcoe that have backyard chicken licensing, they're 4 months old.
Okay, I have a question. With the different sizes of lots, one of the options is up to an acre allowing up to 2 hens, and over an acre allowing up to 4 hens. What would your thoughts, Mr. Ham, be on that? And is there a suggested area of coop per chicken that is a minimum size?
So as far as acreages, most municipalities don't have, I'll call it a sliding scale. I think that's what Sasha was calling it. Just because it's now you're policing lot size, right? And number of birds. As far as coop size, that's all determined by we actually have a layer and pullet code of practice that we refer to, and even our provincial animal welfare group refers to that too. So depending upon the production, it'll be so many square feet per hen, including nest space and perch space. It's not a big coop that's needed for 4 hens. And as far as acreages go, yeah, like we've been talking to City of Toronto, and they're looking at a lot of the same things, and they don't have, like, it's your 1/3 acre lot. They were even investigating at one point having chickens in a high-rise on the balcony, but I don't think that went anywhere.
Councillor Cabral?
There we go. Thank you, Mary Ellen. I guess maybe since we're kind of talking about this now, lot size and whatnot, I'm quite confident that the restrictions on where the coop can be its particular size in relationship to our own lot sizes here in Elmvale. I can tell you right now, there's going to be a substantial number of residents in Elmvale that will not be able to have backyard chickens simply because their rear yard is in some cases less than 9 meters long, and with the limitations and setbacks from buildings and property lines and school property lines, there's going to be a lot of people in the settlement areas that, because of those restrictions, simply won't be able to have a coop in their backyard. And I'm wondering if in that respect, we might not want to consider possibly having some kind of an allowance in there where people who don't meet those setbacks and don't have a large enough property to have a coop and the chickens, that they might be able to maybe get some kind of permission or authorization from their neighbors on either side. I'm wondering if that's something that might be considered, because I was on Google Maps and I was doing some measurements and some distance taking, and I can tell you there's a substantial number in Elmvale who may want to participate in the program, but there's just no way they will, even with the limitations as far as the setbacks are concerned from structures and property lines. So that's why I was waiting until we got to that, but we're already discussing lot sizes now, so I'm bringing it up.
Okay, I'll turn it to Clerk Ainsworth first.
Thank you. As you mentioned later on in the presentation, we will be discussing the setbacks that are proposed, and staff will be going through some of the reasons why these numbers are being proposed. So it might be beneficial to wait for that portion of the presentation to have this discussion.
Okay. We did touch on inoculation vaccination, and I believe that you said it depends whether they acquire the hens from or chicks from reputable breeders. I have a concern and think it should be a requirement for having the birds vaccinated, inoculated. At the proper point in the presentation, I'd be interested in your comments on that, Mr. Dam.
Okay, do you want them now, or shall we, I can't remember if there's a...
Go ahead and give them now, if you would, please.
Okay. So you can get, like from Bonnie's or Price, they do sell what they call dual purpose birds. So they are, it's sort of the cockerels you'd raise for meat, and the hens you'd keep as, like the females you'd keep and raise them up to hens. They do sell them, but like I said, you end up with, you could potentially end up with some disease challenges. That's not a guarantee that you will, but the commercial industry, like I said, we vaccinate our hens to give you the strongest hen possible. That gives you and that we do it for hen health, but we also do it for food safety reasons. We even have a Salmonella reduction strategy in the industry that if any of these, we test these hens, and if any of them contract Salmonella, we actually have a process to, if they're pullets, we destroy them, right? We don't want to take that risk. If they're in lay, the same thing will happen. We will destroy those hens, just because it's a food safety risk. Now, as far as what you guys would like to do, it's up to you as to what you'd like. I've always recommended getting hens that have been vaccinated, because we do vaccinate for things like so at the hatchery you'll get vaccinated for Marek's disease, which is like a chicken tumor type of disease that birds will get if they're exposed to it long enough, and probably bronchitis. But we'll vaccinate birds for things like Newcastle, infectious pharyngotracheitis, some of these issues that we see pop up again in these longer-lived birds. If you go to the Ontario Animal Health Network, or the Ontario Animal Health Network out of the University of Guelph, we will list when we end up with cases of small flock ILT, and it pops up in various parts of the province. And we generally don't get commercial flocks infected with ILT simply because the broiler birds are not around long enough, and our layer birds are all vaccinated for it. So that's just some of the things you'll have to balance out. I'm not sure what kind of commercial poultry you have around the area, but that's going to be a concern for some of your farmers in the area if they have, like if you've got quota holding chicken, turkey, or layer farmers in the area, that, you know, that's always a concern they have is the backyard flock going to be a disease reservoir for them?
Well, we certainly do have chicken farms and farmers that are concerned about that. So what is the practical process then of requiring vaccination? And is it just a one-time shot? And would it be pretty easy to require proof of vaccination on the registration of a license for backyard chickens?
Well, if you get pullets from Pullets Plus, Clarence will give you, I think it's pretty much a declaration of what the hens have been vaccinated for or with over the previous 4 months. You know, that becomes a challenge, like in our show poultry industry. A lot of the challenges we have is for small doses of vaccine, because when you buy a vial of vaccine, it's usually a 1,000 or a 10,000 bird dose. So doing it for small lots is fairly impractical, but our show poultry folks will buy, you know, 1,000 bird dose and vaccinate their 50 birds with it, simply because it's the birds have value, and they want to protect their genetic heritage, right? So vaccinating birds after the fact, after you have them, is not a simple thing to do. It's probably better to get it done before.
Councillor Cabral?
Thank you, Mayor Allen. Mr. Dam, I think earlier on you were saying that if they get it from a hatchery at an appropriate age, that those birds are vaccinated prior to receiving them. Is that normal practice for them then? I'm just thinking along the lines, if they're not allowed to have chicks and they can only get the birds when they're, 16 to 20 weeks old or whatever it was, I think 16 weeks old, then would those birds have already had the appropriate shots that they normally would have gotten from these hatcheries?
Yeah, so there's two components to this. There's the hatchery that hatches the chick, and you get probably 2 vaccines from there. The Marex and bronchitis, maybe a cocci vaccine also, so up to 3. But as those hens are being raised in the pullet house, they're vaccinated another 8 to 9 times before they reach the lay barn. So that's how we manage, that's how we build a strong hen.
Follow on, please.
Yes.
Sorry.
Follow on.
Thank you. Yes, Mr. Dam, I'm just thinking about the dynamics there with respect to a person having 4 chickens in their keeping in their backyard, and they may be quite isolated. There may be no one else around for hundreds of meters that has chickens as well, versus a commercial operation where there may be thousands, if not tens of thousands of chickens all in the same congregate environment. And basically at that point in time, you really want to make sure that one chicken doesn't have the disease and spreads it to the rest of them in that type of an environment. I'm just wondering if those additional shots would be something that would be critical in nature to the 4 hens in someone's backyard versus, what we're kind of talking about here, where they're in a large commercial setting.
Right. Yeah, so that's a good question, because if you want to talk about risk, yeah, there's risk when you've got large birds together in a single area like a barn. But for 4 hens, you can argue risk back and forth. But if they're exposed to, we keep our birds inside a house that's got bird netting on it or bird screening, so we don't have we have rodent control programs. We have all that stuff in the commercial side to keep out the wild birds. If we have these hens in a backyard flock running around in the grass or in a coop, any starling, like waterfowl flying over, like right now we actually have an advisory out for avian influenza during the migration times, because we're in fall migration now. Push this advisory out end of August every year, because as the birds fly south, there's potential for interaction between the wild bird population and our domestic birds. So the same would be said for a backyard flock too. So it's a different level of risk, but if they come up with something like, we don't have a vaccine for avian influenza, but this is just another disease component to think about. If someone's chickens start dying from avian influenza and they actually take them to the vet like they're supposed to, and they take a swab of it and it turns out positive for avian influenza, that's a foreign animal disease. That our lab is obligated to tell Canadian Food Inspection Agency about that, and then that starts a process in motion in regards to the isolation of that flock, potentially the destruction of that flock in a quarantine zone around that area. In the commercial industry, we take it very seriously because that foreign animal disease actually impacts our trade. That could potentially be challenging for you guys in Springwater, and it goes both ways. If one of your small flocks got infected with a disease and one of the commercial flocks are within a quarantine zone, or vice versa, if we have, say we have an avian influenza outbreak in a commercial flock, and some of your residents are in that catchment zone, CFA may come to you and say, okay, we need to know where every backyard flock is so we can quarantine them and watch for health status. So that's another disease component that there is no vaccine for, but it's now a function of proper biosecurity and that. So do the birds need all those vaccines? You can argue that they don't, but you're opening up for more health challenges later. And I guess the next question is, how long do you intend to let the residents keep these birds? Because in a commercial operation, we call them end of lay at 72 weeks. So they're in the barn for 52 weeks for 1 year, and then we ship them out to Maple Lodge to make chicken wieners. I'm guessing some of your residents may keep these birds for much longer than that, because they'll lay for 3-4 years. The egg production keeps going lower and lower and lower. But then chances are those birds will end up dying from Merrick's disease at some point because they'll end up with tumors in them. So it's a bit of a balance of risk. As a scientist and as an animal production specialist, I'm always about protecting our livestock and poultry. And the best way we can do that is good biosecurity, and vaccines are another tool.
Okay, continue, Deputy Clerk, please.
Thank you, and I just kind of want to make a comment regarding vaccinations. So when you think about the licensing, we first need to permit the license for the property and the location, and then they would purchase the hens. So we just need to consider in the licensing bylaw how we would issue the license, but then require in a time frame to show proof of vaccination if that is what council wishes to do, so moving forward. So moving to slide number 6, we already touched on this. I believe Mayor Allen talked about the sliding scale, so I don't need to go over everything. When considering a sliding scale, it's important to note that there are no prohibitions on property size. So our goal is to have residents comply with the bylaw. So when you add more than 4 hens, if that was a wish for properties that are larger than an acre, you have to think of how many more eggs are being produced in manure. And if eggs are not utilized, we don't want the public to be tempted to sell or distribute the eggs, or they find it difficult to remove the manure when it's being produced. So this is why we kept it at 4, so we can stay consistent with our message out to the public. If there's no further questions on slide 6, we'll move to slide 7. And this is regarding the license fee. So staff's recommending a $50 annual license fee. The fee will be included in the Backyard Chickens licensing bylaw to stay consistent with other township licensing provisions. The annual license allows us to track any changes to the property, Coupe, or owner. With having an annual license with an attributed fee, the township has the capability of sending out renewal notices and tracking changes.
1 second, please. It's Councillor Ritchie, please.
Mayor Allen, I'd like to ask the staff how they came up with the $50 fee.
Okay, Deputy Clerk.
Through you, Mayor Allen, to Councillor Ritchie. The $50 fee we came to that conclusion based on other licensing bylaws. We've seen up to $100 for an annual fee, up to $100 for a one-time fee. We felt that $50 was appropriate so we could be able to track the changes over the 3-year pilot program. And we thought that $50 was appropriate for the amount of work that went into having hens on your property and for staff to review the license provisions and the Coupe regulations for each application. But as I will go over in slide 8, council has additional options. You can choose a one-time license fee of any dollar amount. So this would mean that applicants only need to apply once with the township, but we wouldn't have the ability to track any changes with the property, Coupe, or the owner in future years. Or you can have just an initial license fee of any dollar amount and then an annual renewal of a lesser dollar amount. So when you consider licensing fees, it's a bit of a balancing act. You don't want a fee that is too high that it hinders a person from obtaining a license, but you want it to be sufficient enough that it considers the administrative work that goes into processing an application. So like I said, i.e. review of the site plan, compliance with Coupe regulations, etc. If considering a one-time license fee with no annual renewals, the township will be relying on bylaw complaints to track any changes to the property, site plan, and the Coupe location. So an annual renewal is really important for us, especially over this 3-year pilot program, because we want to be able to track changes. We also want to know who wants to continue on with their license past the first year.
Councillor Cabral?
Thank you, Mayor Allen. I did have a look at this, and I thought, actually, to be quite honest, $50 was a little bit high. These chickens, for a lot of people, the educational aspect, the aspect of being able to supplement their own food through the eggs, and chickens may get old, but there's a lot of people out there that still make chicken soup out of an old hen. So I see it a little bit different than just having a pet dog or a pet cat. And also with us supposedly moving to online applications and online notifications, I would see that the initial licensing would take place, a little bit more in-depth information, and I could see that staff would have, some review because they're going to be looking at drawings and looking at where the Coupe and that is. However, as far as the renewals are concerned, I really see that as more of an administrative task, in that these folks should be able to just once a year, if we've got their email address, send them out a little reminder. Are you keeping your chickens? Are you going to renew your license? There's no cost, or maybe a nominal $5 or something. It's just $5 almost gets in the way, to be honest with you sometimes. But if people realize that, yeah, it's maybe $25, I think that's a little bit more reasonable to get this on the go, because initially they're also going to have to build this Coupe and invest some of their own time and money into this venture. That after that comes along a year later, I think a real easy renewal system electronically would be more than adequate without burdening them with an additional cost every single year. So that's just my thoughts on the licensing aspect as far as fees are concerned.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Ritchie?
Thank you, Mayor Allen. I'm in agreement with Councillor Cabral. I thought $25 for the start, and then every year after that, maybe $10 online registration. We want to make it so that people will come back and register, and so that we can share the information with them and keep in touch with people, so that if something happens, then we can reach out and we know who they are. We've got people out there right now doing this. That's one of the reasons why I've supported this whole project, is to invite them and share the information with them, and hopefully they'll comply. Welfare of the animal is very important, and I agree with our poultry specialist, what he's talking about there about the 4-month-old bird. I think that brings some comfort to the big commercial farmers in our area. These guys have got millions of dollars tied up, 40,000 birds in one barn. So to have birds that are vaccinated, I think brings some relief. I think it's a fine line we got to walk here, but I think we can do it. 25 for original, 10 every year after that for a 3-year project, and see where it goes. That's my 2 cents worth.
Clerk Ainsworth?
Thank you, and through you to council. Just as a side note, once the presentation is completed, each of these provisions, the proposed provisions, will be tabled one at a time through individual motions. At that time, if you wish to see a change in that direction, please ensure that you are proposing amendments. So that will take place once the presentation is completed. So as an example, if Councillor Cabral wanted to propose an official change to the $50 application fee, it would take place as an amendment once that motion is put on the floor, once the presentation is completed.
Councillor Hannah?
Thank you. Unless I'm wrong, my understanding is that when somebody applies for the license, they're going to have a coop. Staff have to go out and inspect that coop. That's not happening when people have dogs and cats, so I would just suggest the initial cost taxpayers is a lot higher than it is with a dog and a cat if staff have to go do an inspection.
Deputy Clerk Helmke?
Through you, Mayor Allen, to Councillor Hannah, I just want to make a clarification. We are not proposing in the bylaw that bylaw enforcement go out and inspect the coops prior to a license being given. It's not like a kennel license. We will be declaring, we will have a declaration within the license for the applicant to declare that the coop meets all these standards. They're going to provide us with a site plan of the coop. And then staff would only go out, meaning bylaw enforcement, if there was a complaint regarding the coop and not complying with the regulations set out in the bylaw.
Okay, proceed please, Deputy Clerk.
So we're going to move to slide number 9, and this is application for a license. So staff recommendation, so an application for a license must be signed by the applicant and or the landowner and shall include, but is not limited to, the following mandatory fields and declarations. So the applicant information, including the name, address, mailing and physical, postal code, telephone number and email address, property owner's information, including name, address, mailing and physical, postal code, telephone number and email address, a site sketch plan illustrating the location, the size of the coop, and the manured storage area on the property, a checklist of specific regulations contained in the bylaw confirmed by the applicant. Moving to slide number 10 to continue. Staff is also recommending that there's a declaration that the applicant has reviewed the resource kit titled Keeping Your Birds Healthy, distributed by OMAFRA. That they reviewed the OMAFRA fact sheet titled Biosecurity Recommendations for Small Flock Poultry Owners, will provide suitable housing and shelter for the backyard chickens in their care, and will maintain such housing in a clean and wholesome state, having regard for the biosecurity recommendation for small flock chicken owners, will provide the backyard chickens with appropriate food, water, space, and environmental conditions conducive to good health, and the opportunity to socialize and engage in fundamental behaviors such as scratching, roosting, and dust bathing, and will abide by the regulations within the backyard chickens bylaw. So in regards to 5A in the current slide, Mr. Dam has provided the township with replacement document guidelines that can be reviewed by the applicant. He did let us know that the resource kit for keeping your birds healthy has not been updated recently by OMAFRA, and there's other resources from the Poultry Council and the National Farm Animal Care Council that provide similar information. So updates will be made and reflected in the draft bylaw to be presented to Council on October 21st. Additionally, Mr. Dam has provided the township with a list of veterinary clinics in Ontario who identify that they can see small flock poultry. This list can be provided to applicants as a resource when they receive their license. And I don't know if Mr. Dam wants to provide any further information on resources and guidelines.
Mr. Dam?
If there's one thing I should really push, and I push this with every municipality, is this is not like having a puppy or a kitten. You're actually eating something that comes out of this animal. So it is a food producing animal, which means whatever goes into the hen is what comes out in the egg. So this is why we don't vaccinate the hens after the fact or give them medication even once they're in lay. If we do, it has to be done under veterinary care so that the birds, there's a proper withdrawal observed for the medication to get out of the bird system and out of the eggs. But yeah, the education component is very critical. I do a 3-hour workshop with the Poultry Industry Council. I have done it in years past for urban hens, and it's usually sold out every year. And if anything, I've probably convinced as many people not to have hens as who have come to take the course, who want to have hens because they realize there's a lot more to it than just taking care of a dog or a cat. So yeah, education is going to be huge on this. There's lots of good information out there, but there's also a lot of garbage out there on the interweb. So that's going to be something pretty critical that you have a source of good information for your constituents.
Thank you. Deputy Clerk?
So if there's no questions, we'll move on to slide number 11. We'll continue on with application for license. So staff is recommending that license will expire the 31st day of December for the year in which it was issued for and required to be renewed annually. If it's determined that an application does not meet the requirements of this bylaw, the township will refuse to issue the license and will refund the license fee. If at any time the township determines as a result of the evidence that is provided that the operation of that backyard chicken hen coop does not conform to the requirements of the bylaw, it may suspend or revoke the license. And tenants must obtain written permission from the property owner to keep hens on the owner's property. So it's important that the tenants obtain this permission from the property owner, and it's included in the license application, as the property owner is ultimately responsible for their own property. This is a standard provision for many of the township licenses, including kennel and refreshment vehicles. If bylaw enforcement receives a complaint, they send a notice to both the applicant, which could be the tenant, and the property owner. If there's no questions, we'll move to slide number 12.
I don't see anything. Continue.
So this is additional options for application for license. So, as I spoke about earlier, council may choose to have a one-time license application and not required to renew applications annually. However, an annual license allows us to track any changes to the property, coop, and owner. For example, an applicant may not wish to continue to have backyard chickens after their first year, and it's important that we track this information during our pilot program. Including the declaration within the application ensures that the onus is on the applicant. They are declaring that they understand the regulations regarding backyard chickens and will abide by the information provided, including the site plan of the coop location they submit. So an annual license allows us to track the success of the 3-year pilot project and how many properties are participating from year 1, 2, and 3. If council's ready, we'll move to slide number 13, and this is coop regulations. So staff recommendation is no backyard chicken hen coop, including manure storage area or outdoor run, shall be located within the intake protection zone 1 of wellhead protection area with a vulnerability score of 10 as defined by the township's source water protection mapping, a front yard or exterior side yard, a 5 meters of any dwelling, so that's 16 feet, 3 meters of any lot line, which is 10 feet, 3 meters of any structure, which is 10 feet, 3 meters of any sewage work, which is 10 feet, and 15 meters of any lot line on which a school is located, which is 49 feet. So the regulations provided in this slide have been recommended based on what other municipalities have included in their bylaws through experience, best practices, legislation, and limiting nuisance to abutting property owners. I can finish all the coop regulations before anybody requests to speak, or we can go through
Councillor
each slide.
Cabral.
Thank you, Mayor Allen. This kind of brings it back. I think council members would be able to recognize now that if you've got a dwelling and you've got to be 16 feet away from it, and then you have to be 10 feet away from any lot line, that's already 26 feet. And we have many properties here within Elmvale. I did look at other settlement areas as well, but a lot of the other settlement areas tend to, I guess for whatever reason, have larger properties, but even in Anton Mills, there were a few there that I doubt would be able to have backyard chickens based on this particular criteria. Some properties, they've only got about 20 some odd feet from their property line to their house, let alone any other structures that would be in their backyard. And structure, I think, would also take into consideration small sheds and whatnot. So I'm wondering if in this particular instance, if there might be some mechanism put in place, because I realize that a lot of this has to do with being a nuisance to the neighbors and causing problems with the neighbors. But maybe there's a mechanism could be put in place where an applicant might be able to have an exception based on neighbors abutting their property, signing off on it, or giving their approval, or giving their authorization for it to be a little bit closer to the property line. I would like to see something like that in the bylaw, because as it stands right now, I don't want to give a percentage, but I'd say there's a good chunk, just looking on Google Maps in Elmvale, that if they want to do this, they won't be able to, simply because of the setbacks.
Deputy Clerk?
Thank you, Mayor Allen. I don't know if Planner Chris Russell can respond to these setbacks, because I believe some of them are contained in the zoning bylaw in regards to structures and lot lines. I just do want to make a comment in regards to getting permission from abutting property owners. The only issue with this is we would need to track if a property sells and a new person moves into the neighboring property. How are we going to ensure that they are for their neighbor having their manure storage structure and their coop closer to their lot line?
All right, just to follow up on that particular point, if we do go with an annual inspection, that might be a consideration that's put on the applicant's renewal to ensure that those conditions, because we would know which ones have these permissions, that might be something for consideration on the renewal to make sure that those conditions are still being met and that their neighbors are still in agreement with the building being there. As far as structures concerned, would and maybe Planner Russell can comment on this for sure. Structures that are less than 100 and 8 square feet that don't require a building permit, do they still have to abide by the setbacks? Because I know a lot of people got these little sheds right up against the fence on their property.
Planner Russell, I'll let you comment on the discussion.
Thank you, Mayor Allen, and absolutely correct. Basically, any structure would count towards that 10-foot setback. From my discussions with the Director of Planning as well, we've been sort of passing this back and forth, and Councillor Cabral is absolutely correct that these setbacks would limit some properties from having chickens as they're proposed today. Generally speaking, this has been proposed to limit the amount of conflicts and the compatibility issues with having these animals on a property and adjacent to residential structures, residential outbuildings. However, there is the opportunity, and I'm hesitant to propose any kind of variance process or approaching neighbors just because of the ability for properties to change hands and the ability for appeals to be launched that would drag the municipality into LPAT hearings. But in the interim, the Director and I have been speaking, and there is the potential that we set setbacks within settlement areas to what the bylaw would propose today, which is a 4-foot setback from side lot lines and rear lot lines within a settlement area, and keep the 10-foot setback for the rural area. That's a possibility if council wishes to move that way, recognizing that any increase or rather decrease in setbacks and locating these chickens closer to abutting property lines are going to increase the amount of compatibility issues we have with neighbors.
1 second, we're
Follow-on
just
comment,
confirming.
Mayor Allen?
Go ahead, Councillor Cabral.
I was just going to say, I can certainly appreciate that, but I also got the sense when this first started up that it's generally speaking, it hasn't been our rural properties that have been looking for the ability to do this. It seems to me that it seems to be those that are in the settlement areas. So just listening to Planner Russell there, it sounds to me like that there might make the issue a little bit more palatable and have basically these setbacks for the rural areas and then the other setbacks for the settlement areas. And maybe even at that point, maybe if they're going to be within 2 feet of the property line or 4 feet of the property line, to maybe still get some kind of a check off on their neighbor to say that they don't mind.
I just reminded, if we're trying to keep the fees, licensing fee and supervision fee low on this, that any agreement that by exception of property neighbors would be labor intensive potentially. Mr. Dam, do you have any thoughts on what's been discussed with respect to these setbacks?
With the, so the, part of what I'm hoping you don't run into is, and you'll get to this too, is when it comes to the coops, the overwintering issues. I've been involved with OSPCA in urban poultry issues where we've got hens in garden sheds, right? Aluminum garden shed in the middle of the wintertime where there's a light bulb in there for heat and the hens are blind because the ammonia burnt their eyes out and they've lost their toes, combs, and wattles because of frostbite. So when it comes to some of the setbacks, yeah, I can understand why you'd want to do some of that, especially when you're dealing with the amount of nutrient that comes out of that hen. So one hen will produce about 1 pound of high test manure every week. And the other thing we say about that is, you know, that's gonna have to be managed somehow, however you guys wish to do that. And that could potentially be smelly. So that's, in the commercial or in the agricultural side, we have something called minimum distance separation calculations, which essentially are odor issues that we can calculate in, but in your case, it's going to be whatever you guys come up with. But just to be aware, the issues you're going to run into from setbacks are going to be mostly around noise complaints and potentially vermin and
we didn't hear that other point.
odor. Sorry,
Odor.
smells.
Right, right. Okay, one thing we haven't really addressed is what are the requirements with respect to winter storage of these animals or dealing with the environment once the elements are not as conducive. So are we, you know, as I read it, we're just leaving that up to the chicken owners to come up with the solution with, but should we be providing some guidance with respect to winterization? Deputy Clerk?
Mayor Allen, we do speak to this in slide number 15, but if you want to address it now, we can, or we can wait until slide 15.
No, I'll let you continue, and it'll come up when it comes up. I don't see any other cards, so please continue.
So moving to slide number 14, staff recommendation is the maximum of 1 backyard chicken hen coop and 1 outdoor run shall be permitted per property. A backyard chicken hen coop shall be provided that has a maximum ground floor of 9 meters squared, at least 0.37 meters square of floor area for each hen, and a maximum height of 4.5 meters, which is 15 feet. And I believe that maximum of 4.5 meters is contained in our zoning bylaw, and the maximum ground floor area of 9.0 meters squared doesn't trigger a building permit process. I don't know if Planner Russell has any more comments in regards to these areas.
Planner Russell?
None at this time, that's absolutely correct.
Okay, thank you.
I don't know if Mr. Dam has anything to add in regards to the maximum floor area for each hen that's being proposed here?
Mr. Dam?
Under the code of practice, if hens are in a non-cage single-tier litter environment, the final space allowance per bird is 1,178 square inches, which is about 8 square feet. So about 2 square feet per hen. It's all in the code, and that's on a litter basis. But if they have access to the outside, that increases that. So, but I think more on the space allowance, like if you're gonna, everything comes back to the code of practice, and that's what if you guys end up with a situation where there's an egregious animal welfare concern, and the provincial animal welfare service is involved, they will bring out the code and the measuring tape and make sure that it's up to snuff. If someone in your catchment or one of your constituents says they're going to put in 4 hens and they put in 8, and someone makes a complaint against that, that's going to be between that person and the PAWS investigator versus you guys, because you're only licensing them for 4 hens at that time. But there's nothing that says they can't go bigger. The challenge will become, it comes to housing, can they overwinter them? That's going to be your biggest challenge. It's not just an insulated house they need. It's going to be, there's going to be need for ventilation. There's going to be need for heat. And some people may bring birds into the garage. Some people may be bringing birds into their basement for all you know, if they don't, depending on how they want to overwinter. One of the municipalities I ran into, I got a call from the people involved in the pilot project in December when we started to get some cold nights, and they realized they insulated the whole house except for the door that flipped down. And to do that really quick, they just put a piece of styrofoam on the inside and completely forgot the fact that when they closed the door, the hens picked at that like popcorn and ate more than 2/3 of it. And I was asked, what do I do with the hens? I said, well, what do they eat? Well, styrofoam. What's in styrofoam? Petrochemical. Okay, that's now in the bird. And my recommendation to her was to euthanize all her hens because I could not give her an idea as to when those eggs would be safe to eat. So it's a little more complicated than, like I said, because it's a food animal, because you're dealing with something beyond a cat or a dog. There is potential for impact to the hen and also for the people that are consuming the product.
Okay, thank you. Continue, please, Deputy Clerk.
So moving on to slide number 15, continuing coop regulations. So staff is recommending the backyard chicken hen coop and the manure storage area exclusive of the outdoor enclosure shall not cumulatively exceed an area of 10 meters squared. All backyard chicken hen coops shall be fully enclosed, weatherproof structure or enclosure built to prevent any rodents from harboring underneath or within its walls and to prevent entrance by any animal. The interior shall include at least one nest box for egg laying, at least one perch giving 0.3 meters of space per hen, which is 1 foot, at least one food and water container. So coop regulations will also include that not only the coop should be fully enclosed weatherproof structure, but requires proper ventilation and a heat source, which is important during the winter months for proper care of the chickens. The township would not require an inspection of the heat source by the fire department, but will include in the draft bylaw that the applicant owner shall follow the manufacturer's instructions for the heat source, and it must be a CSA rated product. I don't know if council has any questions in regards to this, and I don't know if Mr. Dam has any follow-ups.
Mr. Dam?
Heat lamps are often used for heat sources, and they work, but they do burn. I've had a number of folks will use like an electric oil heater, so there's no risk for burning if it tips over. Like a little, I've seen folks use the little ceramic heaters, and they are, I don't recommend them because they don't stand up to the dust, and when they tip over, you're just burning your coop down at that point. So yeah, there's lots of things, but yeah, the CSA approval will be the big thing, but you'll probably want something that'll stand up to agricultural use. So whether it's some of these heating pads or whatnot, there's lots of stuff out there that you can pick up at the Co-op or TSC. Birds don't have to be kept at 20 degrees centigrade in the wintertime, but they do need to be warm enough, and they do need to be sheltered. But also be aware that in the fall, that's when all the rodents start looking for a warm place, and a chicken coop will be one of those also, especially when if there's accessible feed.
I would assume that this required written publication material that you're saying is necessary for potential chicken owners to read would include information on how to winterize chickens. Is that true, Mr. Dam?
No, the code of practice just says they need adequate shelter. So that's up, because that will change based on what area of the country you're in, right? If you're in lower mainland BC where they don't get below 0 degrees versus Nunavut when it's minus 40 at the best of times.
Right.
So, but you know, your R value, like I said, you don't need the birds don't need to be kept, like the birds need to be kept, you know, above 0 degrees, where the water won't freeze, right? They can manage because they have feathers, but if the coop isn't kept clean, if the litter's not dry, you know, the ammonia produced by the manure, if they don't clean out enough, will cause other issues too. It'll cause respiratory issues. So the ventilation is actually, you don't want to stick them in a box, right? You know, a freezer is a perfect insulator, but you're not going to put chickens in a box like that over winter.
Right.
So that's the one thing I've always, every time I get a call from a urban poultry person in the fall, it's usually because they have a respiratory issue because they've closed up the barn or the coop and they've made it too tight and there's not enough air movement to push the moisture out.
Okay. Councillor Moore?
Thank you, Mayor Allen. I just noticed that in the coop regulations, it references to be built to prevent any rodents from harboring underneath. But it doesn't say that it must be a concrete floor. That's where the rodents are going to get in. So should we be a bit more specific on how to build the structure?
Mr. Dam?
So when in our commercial houses, we don't have dirt floors because of that reason. We do put gravel or crushed stone around the outside of the coop because if rodents try and tunnel down through the foundation, the gravel will collapse on them, right? But we mostly have concrete floors in there to prevent both insects and rodents from coming up. How you choose to do that with your coops is going to be up to you.
Okay. Continue, Deputy Clerk, please.
Thank you, Mayor Allen. So we'll move on to slide number 16, continue on with the staff recommendations for the coops. So all backyard chicken hen coops and outdoor runs shall be secured against the entry of predators. All backyard chicken hens must be kept securely in a coop or outdoor run at all times, and the coop must be locked from sunset to sunrise.
So just for clarification on that, so they must be kept securely in a coop, so that suggests that they're fenced in at all times and not allowed to roam in backyards freely, even if it has a gate around it. Is that correct, Deputy Clerk?
That's correct, yes. They have the choice of being in the coop or the outdoor run. They can't be freely moving about in the backyard outside of that area that's designated for the coop and the outdoor run.
And the outdoor run would have screening on sides and top as well?
Yes, through to you, Mayor Allen, I have reviewed some of the different coop designs, and I have seen that it's like a mesh screening that's around the outdoor run. Mr. Dam might be able to provide any more information he's seen regarding the run areas and the coop designs.
Thanks, Mr. Dam.
Yep, so chicken wire is what it is, and it can be done for the outdoor coop. Hens will roost at night, and even though they're chickens, they still think they're migratory half the time, so they will fly up into neighboring trees or wherever. They have that urge to roost, but then, like I said, lots of things can climb trees, like raccoons that can go after them. So that's why a number of municipalities will lock the hens inside the coop, because then, and also the coop itself, the outdoor run, we recommend that you bury the chicken wire at least a foot into the ground to prevent, the foxes, coyotes, the neighbors' dogs, or whatever, to try and dig underneath the fence. That's a thing that happens fairly frequently. So that's one way to prevent that from you losing your hens at night or during the day.
So we were having suggestions about best practices, concrete bases, wire, stone around the outside, wire buried a certain depth, coop design. How would we incorporate all of this into our draft regulations, Deputy Clerk?
Thank you, Mayor Allen. Depending on any amendments that Council proposes to the recommendations tonight, staff would work with those amendments and we would propose it in the draft licensing bylaw, but we'd also Dam as a resource. I have been writing down information that he's been providing, but we will work with whatever Council proposes and move on from there to the draft licensing bylaw.
Thank you. Councillor Cabral?
Thank you, Mayor Allen. Just along that point, we did provide, I think at the beginning, there was information from certain agencies and organizations that we were planning on making available to the applicant as a suggestion, maybe a short little guide specific to Ministry of Agriculture guidelines on small coops and things like that might be appropriate at the same time, and also maybe their design along with, but that doesn't necessarily have to be part and partial to the actual licensing regulation.
Okay. Mr. Dam, in your experience, have you seen publication that is best practices or guidelines as to how to get into the hobby of backyard chicken keeping?
We don't publish anything per se for that. The Canada Plant Service years ago used to have a backyard or a small coop building drawing, but I think that's been gone for quite a while now. Like you can buy coops from various retailers and you can spend a few $100s on one if you want, or you could, I've seen them made out of homemade ones that work very well. So we don't unfortunately publish anything like that. That's not really the mandate of the ministry. I'm supposed to spend most of my time with the commercial industry, but I'm spending tonight with you guys and anyone else on the small flock side to make sure that you have the best information possible. But if I can find some information, I can definitely forward it.
Okay, thank you. Continue, Deputy Clerk, please.
Thank you, Mayor Allen. So we're going to move to slide number 17. So coop regulations, additional options. So council may choose to change any of the distances for the location of the coop or outdoor run. These distances are recommended to reduce the nuisance to abutting properties and assist in mitigating possible complaints to bylaw enforcement. The interior provisions for the coops, so the nest box, perch, are for the welfare of the hens and to promote healthy birds under OMAFRA recommendations for small flock poultry owners. Interior provisions for coops are also based on the National Code of Practice for pullets and laying hens. Mr. Dam referenced that.
Okay, continue, please.
Moving on to slide number 18. We're going to move to yard cleanliness and health and safety. So the staff recommendation is that all deceased backyard chicken hens shall be disposed of promptly in a sanitary manner. The slaughtering of backyard chickens hens on the property is prohibited. All backyard chicken hen coops must be kept in clean and sanitary condition at all times, free of vermin, obnoxious smells, and substances, and in good repair. So the County of Simcoe's Waste Management Division has advised that currently chicken carcasses can be disposed of in the green bin. However, the county does reserve the right to limit change acceptable materials in the future based on their contracted service providers' requirements or based on the technology used at their landfill sites and processing facilities. If there's no questions, we can move on to number 19, continuation of yard cleanliness. So staff is also recommending that backyard chicken hens must be provided with food and clean water at all times, shelter, light, and ventilation to assist in keeping the hen in good health. Food and water shall be kept in solid, rodent-proof, and weather-proof containers. Uneaten food shall be removed in a timely manner. All stored manure shall be covered by a fully enclosed container. No more than 3 cubic feet of manure shall be stored. All other manure not used for composting or fertilizing shall be removed daily from the hen coop and outdoor run. Selling of eggs, manure, meat, or other products derived from backyard chicken hens is prohibited. The counties of Simcoe accept small residential quantities of chicken waste in their green bin currently, and this is for those keeping a few backyard chickens only, not large-scale operations. The manure must be contained in certified compostable bags for collection for the health and safety of service providers. And I know Mr. Dam would also probably like to speak to using manure in personal gardens.
Mr. Dam, please.
Yes, so there's a couple of things. One is, I already mentioned 1 pound of manure a week out of these hens. That is, for lack of a better term, I'm going to call it high test. If you put that in your backyard, your black composter, the backyard, you probably will kill the composter because it is so nutrient dense. But one of the recommendations I always make is that to not use the raw chicken manure in a vegetable garden. If the hens are carrying a disease, and I'll use an example of Salmonella, it'll be passed down in the manure. that salmonella put on a vegetable garden, if you're consuming those vegetables, can be picked up. Salmonella can be picked up by the vegetables. So we recommend that you compost the manure properly. If you're using that manure for your flower bed, that's one thing, because you're not consuming anything from that garden. That's a concern we have. There's actually some studies that have shown that salmonella gets picked up by things, well, by a lot of plants, including celery. Most vegetables can pick it up if it's, and when I say composted, the manure needs to be composted for a long enough time for it to heat up hot enough that the whole pile has to be turned so it's composted properly to kill the pathogens in it. And that's why we don't recommend using that raw manure for our garden.
So moving on to slide number 20. So there's additional options for yard cleanliness. So council may choose to impose additional regulations regarding cleanliness and health and safety provisions. The recommendations being proposed are consistent throughout other backyard chicken bylaws and are included to ensure the health and safety of residents, the chickens, and to reduce the nuisance to abutting properties. If there's no questions, moving on to slide number 21. So the draft licensing bylaw. So in the following slides, council is being presented with recommendations for approval based on information provided within this presentation on the key licensing provisions. So recommendations approved tonight will form the draft backyard chickens licensing bylaw that's to be presented to council at the October 21st regular meeting. So I will go over each of the recommendations in these last slides as a final overview of the presentation and the key items. At the end of this presentation, the mayor will bring forth each recommendation formally and ask for a mover and a seconder, and any further discussion or amendments can be proposed then. So moving to the next slide, the recommendation for property size is that council approve the recommendations provided by staff in regards to property size at the September 28th Backyard Chickens Licensing Workshop, and that the recommendations be included in the draft licensing bylaw for council's consideration at the October 21st, 2020 regular meeting. The second recommendation is maximum number of chickens. Is that council approve the recommendations provided by staff in regards to maximum number of backyard chickens at the September 28th Backyard Chickens Licensing Workshop, and that the recommendations be included in the draft licensing bylaw for council's consideration at the October 21st regular meeting. Moving to the next slide, license fee. The recommendation is that council approve the recommendation provided by staff in regards to license fee at the September 28th Backyard Chickens Licensing Workshop, and that the recommendation be included in the draft licensing bylaw for council's consideration at the October 21st regular meeting. Application for license.
Oh,
Sorry, Councillor Ritchie?
I'd like to amend that license fee. I'd like to change it to $25 for the first.
Councillor Ritchie, we're just going through all of them, and then going through them individually. So once we get to that one, bring forward your amendment, please.
Thank you.
So for license fee, it's the council approve the recommendation provided by staff in regards to license fee at the September 28th Backyard Chickens Licensing Workshop, and that the recommendation be included in the draft licensing bylaw for council's consideration at the October 21st regular meeting. Application for license recommendation is the council approve the recommendations provided by staff in regards to the application for backyard chickens license at the September 28th Backyard Chickens Licensing Workshop, and that the recommendations be included in the draft licensing bylaw for council's consideration at the October 21st regular meeting. Coupe regulations. The council approve the recommendations provided by staff in regards to the backyard chicken hen coop regulations at the September 28th Backyard Chickens Licensing Workshop, and that the recommendations be included in the draft licensing bylaw for council's consideration at the October 21st meeting. And then lastly, yard cleanliness and health and safety provisions. The council approved the recommendations provided by staff in regards to regulations for yard cleanliness and the health and safety at the September 28th Backyard Chicken Licensing Workshop, and that the recommendations be included in the draft licensing bylaw for council's consideration at the October 21st regular meeting. So in our last slide, we go over the next steps. So the draft bylaw is going to be presented to council on October 21st, and will provide the opportunity to review the bylaw in its entirety and make any revisions before it's presented to council for final approval at the same meeting that the final temporary use bylaw is being provided. The draft bylaw will also include Part 1 offenses under the Provincial Offences Act, allowing bylaw officers to lay charges for nonconformance with the bylaw. Final approval of the bylaw is currently proposed to be at one of the meetings in November. However, final approval of the licensing bylaw is dependent on any appeals being filed in regards to the passing of the temporary use bylaw. These two bylaws need to be approved in conjunction with one another. The zoning needs to allow for backyard chickens before they can be licensed. Thank you, and that completes the presentation.
Thank you, Deputy Clerk, for the presentation, providing the overview, and to Mr. Dam for answering questions and educating us. For the public to continue to have input, if they want to express any views with respect to what they've seen, heard tonight, how will that be happening? How should that happen, Clerk Ainsworth?
Thank you. As always, staff are always accepting comments or questions from members of the public. Those could be forwarded to council if received outside of a meeting time, as well when the draft bylaw is proposed to council on October 21st. There is the opportunity for members of the public to pose questions or comments through the question period portion.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so we're moving through these one at a time. Again, I'll ask for a mover and a seconder for each of the motions, and then open it up for discussion and or potential amendment. So the first one is property size. Can I have a mover and a seconder to get this on the floor, please? Councillor Cabral, Deputy Mayor Coughlin. That council approve the recommendations provided by staff in regards to property size at the September 28th backyard chickens licensing workshop, and that the recommendations be included in the draft licensing bylaw for council's consideration at the October 21, 2020 regular meeting. Any discussions with respect to this? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor? That is carried. Next, we go on to maximum number of chickens. Mover and a seconder to get this on the floor, please. Councillor Cabral, Councillor Moore. Same preamble. Council approve the recommendations provided by staff in regards to the maximum number of backyard chickens at the September 28 backyard chicken licensing workshop, and that the recommendations be included in the draft licensing bylaw for council's consideration at the October 21, 2020 regular meeting. Comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? That is carried. Next is license fee. Mover and seconder to get this on the floor, please. Councillor Ma and Councillor Ritchie. That council approve the recommendation provided by staff in regards to the license fee at the September 28th backyard chickens licensing workshop, and that the recommendations be included in the draft licensing bylaw for council's consideration at the October 21, 2020 regular meeting. Councillor Ritchie.
I'd like to make an amendment to that.
Go ahead.
I'd like to amend that from 50 to 25, and every year after that, $10 for renewal.
Deputy Mayor Coughlin?
Mayor Allen, we would need a second.
Yeah, you're seconding it?
I can second it, yes.
Okay, and I open that up to comment.
Oh. Sorry.
Yeah, Deputy Mayor
Sure.
Coughlin?
Thank you, Mayor. Just a question on the process for our licensing, or sorry, our permit fees for our burn permits. I believe it's 15 and it's an online, and I'm just curious of consistency throughout. I do like the idea of being able to track as we move forward through the 3-year pilot, but I think that annual licensing or permitting where they would have to resubmit drawings, or simply like a checkbox that says, yes, I still am doing everything that I said I was going to do when I first entered this agreement, and continue to move forward. Is that a full option for us?
Deputy Clerk Helmke?
Through you, Mayor Allen, to Deputy Mayor Coghlan, that's correct. So the annual renewal would be less cumbersome than the actual original application. It would be exactly as you said. It would just be declaring that nothing's changed on the property from the original application, and that the owner attests to that.
Councillor Ma?
Thank you, Mayor Allen. I can't remember, but I'm curious what the licenses is for the dogs. I can't remember what it is each year. Is it 20?
Licensing for what? I didn't hear.
The dogs.
Oh, the dogs, yep.
I'm just trying to be more consistent. Maybe either we can go with that route, but I can't remember.
Clerk Ainsworth, we'll just get the answer here.
Thank you. We have Bylaw Enforcement Officer Kellington on the line. Maybe she can go over the new proposed fees that will be coming to council at the next meeting.
Bylaw Officer Kellington? Maybe not.
I'm just looking it up right now.
This is coming forward next meeting?
Yes, and she did just make a comment that she is looking it up. She will provide a response in just a moment.
Okay. And while she's doing that, do we, for this sort of thing, should we consider adding a provision that be reviewed annually? The fee?
That the fee itself, as the amount of the fee
Yes.
be reviewed annually?
Yes.
That is something council could request be included in the bylaw.
Right.
Through you, Mayor Allen, to Councillor Ma Chapman. What we're proposing in our new canine control bylaw would be for an altered, which is spayed or neutered animal, would be $20. For unaltered dog would be $25, and then for our dangerous dog section would be $200, and then a replacement tag would be $7. So that would be annually.
I didn't hear all of that.
Ms. Kellington, could you repeat that a little louder, please? It was a bit difficult to hear you.
An altered dog would be $20 annually. An unaltered dog would be $25, and then our dangerous dog section would be $200, and then for replacement tag would be $7.
Okay. Councillor Ritchie, could I suggest then you said $25 and then 10? Could I suggest that it be added, that be reviewed on annually?
Mayor Allen, this is only a 3-year project, so I think if we make a decision tonight to go with it, I think we want to bring people into the fold and get them to use it. I think a few bucks kind of obligates them to renew, and it keeps the finger on them. So, again, it's only a 3-year project.
Okay. Councillor Hanna, did you have a comment?
I think it was the same as Councilor Ritchie's, that if it's a pilot project, maybe we can review it at the end of the pilot project.
Yep. Okay. Any other comments then? Councillor Ma?
Well, it comes out to the same amount as Councillor Ritchie, but I know we said 25 and 10, or we can be more consistent without thinking do $15 per year. It comes up to the same amount. And I guess it depends if staff wants to be all the same or different prices. Either way.
Clerk Ainsworth.
Thank you, through you to council. The fee that's established, we have quite a wide range of licensing fees. So for it to be consistent with one other type of license wouldn't be particularly beneficial to staff. The fee that council would like to establish is fine with the administration portion of it.
Okay, any other comments before we vote? Everybody clear on it? All those in favor? That is carried. Do you have to read the?
Yes, so that vote was on the amendment to include the $25 annual license fee and $10 renewal fee. So the main motion would read that council amend the recommendation provided by staff in regards to the licensing fee at the September 28th Backyard Chicken Licensing Workshop, and that the proposed license fee be amended to $25 annual and $10 for a renewal fee, and that the recommendation be included in the draft licensing bylaw for council's consideration at the October 21st, 2020 regular meeting.
All those in favor? Carried. Thank you. Next is application for license. Can I have a mover and second to get that on the table? Deputy Mayor Coughlin, Councillor Moore, that the council approve the recommendations provided by staff in regards to the application for a backyard chickens license at September 28 Backyard Chickens Licensing Workshop, that the recommendations be included in the draft licensing bylaw for council's consideration at the October 21, 2020 regular meeting. Any comments or discussions on that? I'm going to turn the chair. I would like to incorporate something with respect to vaccination. Would that come in this section or a separate amendment? Clerk Ainsworth?
Yes, this section would be appropriate.
Okay, I'll turn the chair over to Deputy Mayor Coughlin. And I would like to propose an amendment to this motion.
Thank you, Mayor Allen. So specific to your your vaccination, if you could elaborate on whether that would be more requirement than that of being purchased from a reputable or licensed.
I was contemplating an amendment that the requirement for the proof of safe vaccination of chicks and hens be included in the application for licensing and renewal of licensing.
Okay, thank you.
And if I may, Deputy Mayor, if I may
before
just
we
continue, I look
then
to.
would just- Before we continue, we would require a seconder, would we not?
Yes.
All right, and seconded by Councillor Moore. Thank you. Continue, continue, Mayor Allen.
Thank you. Mr. Dam, I just want to get the wording correct about the vaccination. Would it be vaccination of hens and then ongoing vaccination of our chicks and then ongoing vaccination of hens? Is that the proper consideration of wording?
Paul, in your case there, if you just had said, if you say hens that have been vaccinated, or sorry, pullets that have been vaccinated, that would cover the day-old chicks up to the point where they start to lay eggs.
Okay, so Clerk Ainsworth is adjusting the amendment to make it sound informed. Yes, sorry, Deputy Clerk.
No, sorry, that would be, okay.
Oh, sorry, Deputy Mayor.
Deputy Mayor Coughlin, through you, I just would like to get some clarification from council and specifically Mayor Allen. So you're asking that a requirement of the application is proof of vaccinations, but at that point when they're applying, they don't know if they're able to are even allowed to have backyard chickens, because we would have to review their site plan and coop regulations. So do we want a provision in there that if they're issued a license, issued a license, that they have to show proof of vaccinations or proof from a reputable supplier?
Deputy Mayor Coughlin, may I interject as well?
Yes, go ahead. Clerk Manure.
As a recommendation, that it can read that proof of vaccination of pullets be provided within 30 days of receiving approval.
Okay, thank you. And if I can continue to Councillor Cabral, and followed by Councillor Ritchie.
Thank you,
Councillor
Mayor Coughlin. I just struggle with wording it in quite a way. I'm wondering if these pullets, and we're going to go with the recommendation of, I believe it was 16 weeks, and that's when these folks are going to be getting them from. Would it suffice if they were to, say, provide township with a copy of their bill showing where they got these pullets from, and that we hopefully would know that if they get them from a reputable dealer, that they have already had their pre-shots. I'm just concerned that having a vet come out and administer a vaccination at a later date, we have no idea what that's going to cost. And I think that might be pushing it a little bit, a bit too much for some folks to be able to do that. So I'd like to see something that provided us with some sense that they've been vaccinated upon purchase, and maybe a copy of their bill of sale might suffice to do that.
Thank you, Councillor Cabral, for that. And before I move on to Councillor Ritchie, would there be an opportunity then, when in the bylaw where it states that the chickens must be 4 months old, and we could say and purchased from a reputable sale? Because I agree with Councillor Cabral in that not only is it cost prohibitive to residents, but also, I mean, I can't tell hens apart, and if you purchase one and have it vaccinated and that one doesn't make it the winter, you can simply replace it with another hen. Like, we're gonna get into tagged and chipping, and like, how do we enforce this? So while I agree with with Mayor Allen in that we want to make sure that we are being respectful and also not just respectful of our poultry farmers, but also considerate in that we are ensuring that the residents have vaccinated backyard chickens. But to have a vet come out and all that after the fact, I think might be prohibitive. So would there be an opportunity, Deputy Clerk, to have wording incorporated in there to the type of bird that would be permitted?
To Deputy Mayor Coughlin, I would actually like to ask Mr. Dam if OMAFRA keeps a list of reputable suppliers, because that's not something that the township would be able to update. And I didn't know if OMAFRA has a list and if they update it regularly to ensure that we know what type of suppliers are out there.
We do not. Yeah, it's not something we keep track of, but like I said, a majority of your ready-to-lay hens come out of Elmira, out of either Bonnie's, Fry's, or Pullets Plus. But the comment about having someone come out and vaccinate a bird is just, yeah, I agree. It is not practical. It's all done before the bird shows up, and then, like I said, once they're in lay, we don't really do anything to those hens at that point.
Thank you for those comments, Sam. I'll move to Councillor Ritchie at this time.
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin. Through to the poultry specialist, Mr. Dam. To implement, and I support this fully, the 4-month-old bird with all its shots. I buy the bird, I buy 4 birds, they've had all their shots. So a year rolls by, I go to re-register again. Do those birds need any more shots after what they've already had? Are they good for life? That's my question.
With some of the vaccinations, they are, but as I said, in our commercial flocks, the birds are only in the barn for 52 weeks, right? They're in the barn for a year, and then they're shipped off to Maple Lodge. So we don't keep them longer than that. A lot of disease issues I deal with in backyard flocks, as I said before, mostly center around ventilation issues. So you can have a bird vaccinated about well vaccinated for a lot of different things, but then put them in an awful condition, and then they will break with the disease. So it's a multifactorial issue. But yeah, like will that hen still have the same level of protection in her second year of life and her third year of life? No, that will decrease. But that'll be a function. And to be honest, like if you're only dealing with a $10 bird, you're not going to spend a lot of money on it after the fact.
Follow up, Councillor Ritchie?
Yes, and to just follow up with what he was mentioning earlier, Mr. Dam, is that anytime you go to vaccinate a bird, if that bird's during its laying cycle, can't eat the eggs. So now it becomes a concern. Does people get sick? We don't want to get into any of that. We want to keep it simple for the people. So we buy a 4-month-old bird and give them the names of Fries, Bonnies, any of these names here where they can pick them up. They're vaccinated. The big commercial people like that. And away you go, make sure they're looked after. I'm comfortable with that. But anything more than that, I think it just gets to be too much. And then it gets into, did they eat the eggs? Did they get sick? We don't want to get into that. Let's just keep it simple. So just a 4-month-old bird vaccinated, I support that. Thank you.
Deputy Mayor Coughlin.
Thank you, Councillor Ritchie. And before I move to Councillor Hannah, I would just ask for clarification from Mayor Allen. The motion that you have before us, is it speaking to the vaccination prior to purchase, or are you speaking to additional vaccination?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Coughlin. I just wanted to get logistically and most practically some minimum degree of vaccination. So I look to Mr. Dam to say realistically what is the best way of accomplishing that? Which vaccinations at what stage?
Thank you, Mayor Allen, and I will come to Mr. Dam and then follow up with, move to Councillor Hannah. So Mr. Dam?
So as I said before, it'll be a combination of vaccines. So we vaccinate the hens between 8 and 9 times in those 16 weeks up to the lay house. So to be honest, it's not even worth giving you a list of vaccines and at what times. That's done by the pullet grower, and you don't have to worry about it. And
Thank you.
We may change like if we have new disease challenges in the industry, we may change the vaccine regime to give those birds more protection against the new strain of bronchitis or reovirus or whatever.
Follow on?
Thank you. Yes, Mayor Allen?
Well, yes, so I agree. I'm not as interested in, because of the impracticality of forcing ongoing vaccination during the life of the bird, but just a minimum vaccination standard, whether it's buying these pullets from accepted suppliers who have vaccinated the birds, that would be sufficient for the amendment from my perspective.
Thank you. And Councillor Hannah?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I do agree with the Mayor that there should be something in written in our policy that the birds that people are bringing into the urban or rural areas need to have a vaccination or proof of a vaccination. I think that would maybe help to some degree reassurance for the poultry industry who express concerns about disease to, I think, all of us. So I do support the initiative that the Deputy Mayor or the Mayor's putting forward.
Thank you, Councillor Hannah. And before I go to Councillor Cabral, Deputy Clerk Helmke, is there wording that would be able to be incorporated in the bylaw then, or suggested wording?
Deputy Mayor Coughlin, I believe Clerk Ainsworth has created an amendment here for wording that could be in the proposed draft bylaw.
Okay, and thank you. Before I go to Clerk Ainsworth, I'd just like to maybe follow up with Councillor Cabral's before we hear the amendment, the wording. Councillor Cabral?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Coughlin. I was just trying to get to the point where when these 16-week-old pullets are coming out, that they've already had all of these vaccination shots. But I'm wondering if it might be easier for us to adopt a schedule with a list of approved sellers of birds that maybe Mr. Al Dam can provide to us at present, which can be changed from time to time. And that the licensing bylaws say that these folks just simply have to buy a bird from one of the approved sellers, and that way we know that the birds that these people are buying have already had these shots, and that maybe they have to produce a bill of sale for us to recognize that in fact that's where they did purchase the birds. I think that might make things a little bit easier for everybody.
Thank you, Councillor Cabral. And to Clerk Ainsworth, please.
Thank you. And just to provide potentially some further clarification, Mr. Dam mentioned earlier that OMAFRA does not keep a list of producers. In the absence of that, the township does stay away from promoting specific businesses. But I believe Mr. Dam mentioned that persons who would purchase pullets from 20-week-old hens from these suppliers would be provided with a certificate of vaccinations that have been provided to the birds. Is that correct, Mr. Dam?
Yeah, with most pullet producers, well, in the commercial industry, the pullet producer is contracted by the layer producer to raise those birds. In the backyard, or the small flock or backyard flock industry, the companies that I deal with most will provide you with they can provide you with a list of what the birds have been vaccinated for, so you'll actually know what vaccines that bird has got.
Thank you.
And Deputy Mayor,
Yeah.
with that
Yes.
said, in the absence of creating a list of acceptable producers, I believe that just the statement of receiving this certificate or notice from the producers along with the application would be sufficient enough to satisfy the requirement that they provide proof that vaccinations have been administered to the 20-week-old hens. And that's why when the draft motion is stating that proof of vaccination of the pullets be provided to the township within 30 days of receiving approval of the application. As Deputy Clerk Helmke mentioned earlier, when a resident is applying, they still don't have the chickens. They don't know if they will be approved depending on the regulations. So we wouldn't be receiving a certificate from them then, but it would provide them a 30-day window to provide it to the township once their application has been approved.
Thank you. So Clerk Ainsworth, at this point then, would we have that second draft amendment voted on by council, or have that just included by staff?
No, it would be an official amendment to the main motion, but staff would wordsmith the bylaw to be appropriate with those conditions of the vaccination. So the amendment would read that proof of vaccination of pullets be provided to the township within 30 days of receiving approval of the application, and it would be added on as a third paragraph to the main motion. So council would need to vote on this amendment and then on the main motion as amended.
Yes, so that was moved by Mayor Allen and Councillor Moore. Are you okay seconding that motion as read by Clerk Ainsworth? Yeah. All right, so council having heard the amendment, all in favor?
No.
All right, and I believe that is carried. Thank you. And then back to the main motion, please. And thank you, Clerk Ainsworth.
Thank you. And as moved by Deputy Mayor Coughlin and seconded by Councillor Moore, that council amend the recommendations provided by staff in regards to the application for a backyard chicken license at the September 28th Backyard Chicken Licensing Workshop and that the recommendations be included in the draft licensing bylaw for council's consideration at the October 21st, 2020 regular meeting, and that proof of vaccination of pullets be provided to the township within 30 days of receiving approval of the application.
Thank you. All in favor? And that is carried. Thank you. I will turn the chair back to Mayor Allen, and my apologies to Mayor Allen and Clerk Ainsworth. It is difficult to see when you were signaling to speak. So,
Thank you.
back to Mayor Allen.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Coughlin. So moving on to Coupe regulations, can I have a mover and seconder to get this on the floor, please? Deputy Mayor Coughlin, Councillor Maw, that council approve the recommendations provided by staff in regards to the backyard chicken hen coop regulations at the September 28 backyard chickens licensing workshop, and that the recommendations be included in the draft licensing bylaw for council's consideration at the October 21, 2020 regular meeting. I see their comments. I'll start with Councillor Moore and then Councillor Cabral.
Thank you, Mayor Allen. I would like to see some specifics put into the regulations regarding materials to be used, especially for flooring. So whether that's concrete or if somebody else knows something else that's indestructible, that would be fine. But I think we need to make sure that our coops are not, like Mr. Dam said, garden sheds in the backyard. So I think we need to be more specific.
Okay, let's hear a discussion on that, and then we'll think of an amendment potentially. Councillor Cabral and Deputy Mayor Coughlin. Sorry, let's have discussion. I didn't have my mic on. So Councillor Cabral and then Deputy Mayor Coughlin.
Mayor Allen, I'm not speak to that. I mean, a garden shed made out of metal, the utility shed might not be appropriate, but I'm actually wanted to speak to the setbacks. So do you want me to wait?
Yes, let's. I think Councillor Moore's potential amendment is more on construction of coops. So let's talk about that first. Deputy Mayor Coughlin, did you have a comment on that?
Yes, thank you, Marilyn. My concern with that would be a lot of the fabricated or the purchase online coops that are smaller are actually coops that you can move within a specific area around your backyard. So is that something that we would be permitting then? Because I know that the hens will eat the grass and then you move it a couple of feet and then move it a couple of feet. That's something that we would be permitting then if people are requiring to submit a plan and whatnot? Or are we talking about, is that different than an actual structure of a coop? Just for clarification.
Let's go back to Mr. Dam and say, get more discussion with respect to coops and kits and what they're usually put on, and the stones and fencing and cement floors. Can you comment further on that, please, Mr. Dam?
Sure. Yeah. So I think what Deputy Mayor is talking about is what we often refer to as a chicken tractor, where it's almost like a mobile pen that you can move across the lawn or the grass or pasture. We use those in some of our artisanal meat bird production. I've seen fair weather chicken coops that are designed that way that you can just, it's on a wheel. It's almost, you pick it up almost like a wheelbarrow and you can just move it ahead a few feet each day if you want. That is an option, but it's not going to be an overwintering option. And there is not, yes, you can lock them up, but you can still get pests going underneath or potentially tipping it over. Depending upon what kind of urban vermin you have in spring water, I know when I'm in Northern Ontario, we also worry about things like bears and weasels and whatnot, because everything eats chicken. So that becomes an issue of whether it's neighbor's dog, coons, skunks, or whatever. Some of the structural issues, yeah, if you're going to have something that's going to be overwintered, it's going to probably have to be a permanent structure. I just can't see how a mobile structure would work unless it's really heavy duty.
Councillor.
Rodent proof, yeah.
Thank you, sir. Councillor Cabral.
Thank you, Mayor Allen. Comment with respect to this. The way the licensing is currently worded, it speaks specifically to pests and vermin, and that it should be constructed in a way to reduce or prevent that from happening. I don't know about you folks, but I subscribe to an email from the TSC stores. They quite often have a two-story chicken coop available, and it's not cheap. They're over $400. But this one here, you can move it around, but the housing area for the chickens is off the ground. It's actually about 1.5 feet above the ground, and the chickens can still walk underneath it. So I don't know how we would put something in the bylaw where, folks might have to actually build a concrete base. I know that Mr. Dam spoke to putting gravel down. That seems like a pretty reasonable solution to help keep the vermin out from the perimeter on the inside, but a good sheet of marine grade plywood would likely do the same thing. And a lot of the better sheds that you could buy that might be suitable for a chicken coop are made out of engineered wood as well. So I just don't know how you could change it to reflect that and then have people build the chicken coop to certain specifications.
So, Mr. Dam, going back to it, what would be your recommendation then, sort of for encompassing wording for Councillor Moore to consider for this amendment that would incorporate protection against burrowing underneath and or pushing over a structure? Yeah, you're on mute there. We can't hear
Sorry
you.
about that. Is it possible to just say, to leave it open-ended, to just say, make it, your coop must be vermin proof? And then you could probably could you give some guidelines into what kind of vermin you're looking for? Because rodents is one thing, mice and rats, rats will actually take the eggs and could potentially even, harm the chickens, but then you get skunks and coons and everything else. So, coons will go vertical and break into a coop through the attic, through the soffits too, right? So it becomes a function of, if you become too prescriptive, I think I agree with Councillor Cabral, you may end up limiting yourself as to how you're going to enforce or give direction.
Okay, Clerk, thank you. Clerk Ainsworth, and then Councillor Moore.
Thank you, and follow on to what Mr. Dam has just mentioned. On page 15 of the presentation, it does have this verbiage in it. For the regulations, it states that all backyard chicken or hen coops shall be fully enclosed, weatherproof structures or enclosure built to prevent any rodents from harboring underneath or within its walls and to prevent entrance by any other animal. So that provision will be written into the bylaw, and it would be up to the residents to conduct their research. Different properties might have different ground covering that they need to take into consideration for what materials they might use, but it would be up to the residents, the way it is written, to select what type of structure would adhere to this regulation.
Thank you. I'll go to Councillor Moore and then Councillor Cabral.
Thank you, Mayor Allen. I wonder if it would be then prudent for us to provide some literature to somebody who has applied about, the fact that rodents do like to dig under, and I'm speaking from experience, so that's maybe why I'm stuck on this. We did have to pour a concrete pad because we did have skunks eat all our eggs, and we've had other rodents, kill a weasel, kill some chickens. So, but I think maybe just providing some literature would be good enough. I think people won't be aware necessarily of how other rodents will be attracted to the chicken coops. So, and it's so disappointing too. And I don't want to see people get turned off, So.
Okay, I'll just go to Deputy Clerk Helmke and then Councillor Cabral if you still want to comment.
Thank you, Mayor Allen. Through you to Mr. Dam. Does OMAFRA have that type of literature in regards to how to rodent proof or what type of rodents you need to be mindful of when you're creating your coop?
We do have some rodent control and insect control fact sheets on our site. But from the education standpoint, the Poultry Industry Council actually has an urban poultry course. That's a 3-hour workshop that I actually teach, and that is available online at the PIC website. And we go over a lot of those different issues. We actually go over everything from production to ventilation to housing to food safety issues to, like I said, soup to nuts, pretty much.
Follow on, Deputy Clerk?
Through you, Mayor Allen, to Mr. Dam, but that workshop costs money for residents to go to, right?
Yeah, correct. I think it's a $35 fee for the course.
Clerk Ainsworth?
Thank you. Through the presentation, staff mentioned that there will be educational documents provided to applicants or with the application package. This can be incorporated in it, and we can provide the residents with the information about the course, and it would be up to their choosing if they wish to attend.
Councillor Cabral, did you still want to comment?
Actually, Councillor Moore covered exactly what I was going to say.
Okay, so Councillor Moore, where are you with the amendment?
I don't know if that is necessary, as long as we've agreed that people will be provided the literature and potentially the course,
Okay,
which I think is very reasonable.
thank you. So we know the motion. I don't need to read it again. On Coupe regulations, Deputy Mayor Coughlin.
Thank you, Marilyn. Then clarification if the amendment was withdrawn or if we're voting on the amendment or the main motion.
Councillor Moore, have you withdrawn the amendment?
I believe so. Is that right? I should just double check with the clerk to make sure that that statement about literature will be included, would it not require an amendment?
Thank you. Yes, the literature will be included and provided to applicants.
Excellent, thank you.
So you've withdrawn that then?
Yes, sir, yes, thank you.
Councillor Cabral?
Thank you, Mayor Allen. This is in regards to the regulations for the Coupe too. Stepping back and wanting to make an amendment with respect to the setbacks and the rear yard setbacks for the structure itself. I got the impression from Planner Russell that the setbacks used or presently in the presentation are different from the actual setbacks used in the settlement areas. And I would like to see some mechanism by which in the settlement areas those more reasonable setbacks might be utilized, because as it stands right now, there's a good chunk of people just based on, even though they're in settlement areas and have a backyard, there's no way they're going to be able to put a chicken coop in their backyard with the setbacks the way they're currently proposed.
So do you have, should I turn to Planner Russell to come up with numbers for settlement areas, or do you have proposed numbers, Councillor Cabral?
I believe Planner Russell had some numbers which he'd indicated there had been some back and forth about the setbacks. I'm wondering if it might be feasible to use those setback numbers in the settlement areas and continue to use the setback numbers that are presently in the presentation outside the settlement areas, or should we just simply go with, if you're building a structure, what's the setback from the property line in an urban area?
Planner Russell, can you distinguish between those numbers, what they were for a settlement area that you quoted, please?
Thank you, Mayor Allen. For the benefit of council, the general setbacks for accessory buildings within settlement areas within an R1 designation or zone would be 1.2 meters or 4 feet from both the rear and side lot property lines, whereas they would be 10 feet in the rural area. So I think at this point, without speaking for the director, I'd say the planning department does not object to that amendment, but obviously subject to the director's comments.
Director Spagnell, do you have any objection to that?
No, Mayor Allen.
Okay, so are you proposing an amendment just to, Councillor Cabral, to distinguish between settlement area and non-settlement area setbacks?
Yes, that setbacks used in the urban settlement areas apply to the building of the coop, and setbacks which apply in the rural area apply to the building or erection of a coop in the rural areas.
Okay.
That's what I'm looking for.
Do we have a seconder for that? Councillor Ma, and comment, Clerk Ainsworth?
Thank you. Through you to Councillor Cabral and potentially Planner Russell. In writing the amendment, for clarification, if we could go to slide 13, which speaks to the proposed setbacks.
Yes?
Go ahead.
These you are proposing to stay for the rural areas or anything outside of the settlement area, correct?
Yes, I am, and I think in all fairness, I don't know about number 7, and the reason I'm questioning it is some of these areas, and I can only use Elmvale as an example, 15 meters from any knot line, which is located by a school, 49 feet, I would suggest that precludes just about every single property who is abutting a school property likely won't be able to have a coop because it's the lot that's 50 feet is pretty long, and then you need another X number of feet from the so I don't know if we should leave that in or take that out, and but I'm prepared not to speak to that. I just would like to see the other ones changed so that people in the settlement areas can have the coops.
Clerk Ainsworth?
Thank you. And follow on to that, for the setbacks within the settlement areas, Planner Russell had mentioned 1.2 meters from the rear and side lot lines. Is that the only provision you are looking to include in this amendment? Because there were other setbacks, for example, number 5, 3 meters from any structure, 5 meters from any dwelling as number 3. Are you looking to include any of those in your amendment?
I would if I knew what those numbers were and if Planner Russell was able to provide them.
Planner Russell?
And really, I guess I would only be speaking as to 5 meters from any dwelling and the 3 meters from any structure. Would that be different in a settlement area?
Planner Russell?
Through you, Mayor Allen. Generally speaking, I don't believe we have anybody from the building department online, but my understanding is the spatial separation between structures is usually 1.5 meters or 5 feet. So again, planning wouldn't object to a similar scenario here. And I'm less confident about reducing the restriction to the dwelling, just given that the noise and odor related impacts that do come along with backyard chickens. I would recommend something more than 5 feet, but it is up to council to determine that.
Yeah, I do appreciate that, and I'm simply looking at this from the perspective of the applicant, his own residence, but it would be possible to be within the shorter distance from the side and still be pretty close to a house there. So I think maybe I would be prepared to leave that as is.
Okay, so are we, just before I get to Councillor Moore, we have to get a seconder with respect to this amendment.
Mayor Allen, Councillor Chapman has seconded the amendment.
Okay, Councillor Moore.
Thank you, Mayor Allen. Looking at the setbacks for this, it eliminates most of Stone Manor entirely. So there's 1,000 homes there, you know, not quite, but almost. We're looking at building another chunk of homes in the next, just, you know, not too distant future. This will eliminate a lot of those. So I would like to see the lot lines adjusted, so the 3 meters of any lot line, because some of these homes are on a 35-foot lot, and they proposed, like we heard today, Mayor Allen, 27 or, you know, 28-foot lots, 25-foot lots. So I would like to see those made smaller if possible.
Deputy Clerk Helmking.
Through you, Mayor Allen, to Clerk Ainsworth, can I just have confirmation that included in the amendment that we are going with the definition of a settlement area as per the township zoning bylaw?
Yes, she is indicating yes. So you're proposing a friendly amendment to the amendment, Councillor Moore?
Well, unless Councillor Cabral would like to add that onto his, which would probably be easier.
Well, I'm looking at this, and I think you're recognizing now what a dilemma that it puts a lot of the residents who are the ones who are actually pushing for this in a lot of cases, because those in rural areas, generally speaking, they already had chickens if they wanted them. And I'm wondering if the R1, for our settlement areas where these chickens are going to be, that's why we're doing this, if the setbacks that apply in R1 zoning cannot apply in the same fashion for the settlement areas with respect to this regulation licensing.
Let me get comments from Planner Russell and then go to Deputy Mayor Coughlin.
Thank you, Mayor Allen. I think what we are suggesting is that using the R1 setback restrictions of 1.2 meters, 4 feet, which is applicable in Stone Manor, which is applicable in Elmvale, as well as a spatial separation of 1.5 meters or 5 feet from any structure, would be the similar recommendation or non-objection rather from the planning department. Again, I'm a little bit on the fence about number 3, the 5 meters from any dwelling, given the potential for impact. So I think that's where council needs to make a determination.
What is the setback presently for a structure close to a dwelling?
It would be
is there one?
1.5 meters, 5 feet.
Maybe we could extend it just a wee bit more to make it, what the setback from the lot line is 1.5 meters?
1.2, 4 feet.
4 feet? What if we were to do from the dwelling 10 feet or 8 feet even? Because these all compound. When they put up their structure, it might actually push them closer to the lot line. You know, and that's the dilemma I was seeing when I was looking at it, is these folks are going to end up, if they have the room, with a chicken coop right in the middle of their backyard. So, and I think in this particular case, if we're looking at the distance from the lot lines, I think that would be okay to apply actually to the dwelling, and I'll tell you why. The person who is putting this coop there is the person who is dwelling in that house, so, you know, it would give them an opportunity to decide whether or not they wanted to do it or not. If it's too close and it doesn't work, then they can opt out themselves, but I don't see that impacting the neighbors when they're on the other side of the lot line anyway.
Okay, Deputy Mayor Coughlin?
Thank you, Mayor Allen, and I agree with what's being said. My only concern would then be the 5 meters of any dwelling, understanding that that speaks to your own dwelling, but then again to your neighbors. And I think that the intent of the trial run is to permit it, and yes, it might end up being in the middle of your backyard, but I think we need to be respectful of people who choose not to have chickens. And I mean, it does give residents an opportunity to do so. I agree with Councillor Moore, we need to be inclusive of smaller properties, but we still need to be respectful of residents who choose not to have chickens. So I think that keeping that 5 meter of any dwelling does speak to the property owner, but it needs to be respectful of the neighbors in the community as well. So I think that keeping the 15 meters from the school and 5 meters of any dwelling, I think, I guess comment from Planner Russell, is that why staff is recommending that number, or why was the 5 meters of any dwelling being recommended?
Planner Russell?
Through you, Mayor Allen, that's absolutely correct. We've also gone out to our neighboring municipalities who have done backyard chickens, and these are in line with those licensing bylaws as well. So it's number 1 to prevent conflicts or land use compatibility issues, and number 2 is being respectful to both what others have done. Thank you.
Okay, so we need a number on the distance from dwellings, and we got to be cognizant of time here before 6:30. Yes, Councillor Cabral? You're on mute.
I would be happy to see 3 meters there. If you put 3 meters there and add both lot line separation limits, you'll still have your 16 feet and more. So I would suggest number 3 could be as low as 3 meters.
Clerk Ainsworth?
Thank you, and for further clarification, are you requesting changes to any of the other setbacks, aside from the 1.2 meters from rear and side lot lines, or 3 meters from any dwelling? Are those the only provisions you would like to include within the settlement areas?
That would be fine by me, thank you.
Okay, so go ahead and read the amendment, please.
Thank you. So the amendment would read that the setbacks outlined in the recommendation from staff be established for properties outside of settlement areas, and that setbacks within settlement areas be established as follows: 1.2 meters from rear and side lot lines, and 3 meters from any dwelling. All other setbacks included outside of settlement areas would remain the same, and that settlement area be defined as per the township zoning bylaw.
Councillor Moore?
Sorry, Mayor Allen, could I just ask for some clarification on 3 meters of any structure? So what is any structure? I just want to be sure that I'm voting on very clear.
Clerk Ainsworth?
My apologies, I thought it was clarification on the motion, because the motion has 3 meters from any dwelling. But if I could defer that to...
Sorry.
Planner Russell?
Thank you, Mayor Allen. I think the discussion was within settlement areas, 1.5 meters from any structure, 5 feet. And that would be any building or detached accessory structure on a lot.
So if they had a shed in their backyard, it would be from that?
Correct. We would want to maintain that minimum required under a building code of 1.5 meters or 5 feet of spatial separation between buildings or structures.
Okay. All right. Clerk Ainsworth?
Thank you. Through you to Councillor Cabral. Is this what you would like to be included in your amendment?
Yes, I apologize. That was one of the items that came up when we were having discussion with Planner Russell too, but that would be one that I would want changed as well.
To what?
1.5.
So may I reiterate the setbacks that you, so that council is fully aware of what is being requested?
Yes.
Please.
Within settlement areas, 1.2 meters from rear and side lot lines, 3 meters from any dwelling, and 1.5 meters from any structure.
Comment? Okay, all those in
Yes.
favor, all those in favor of the amendment? Opposed? That is carried. So read the main motion, please.
That council amend the recommendation provided by staff in regards to the backyard chicken hen coop regulations at the September 28th Backyard Chickens licensing workshop, and that the setbacks outlined in the recommendation be established for properties outside of settlement areas, and that setbacks within settlement areas be established as follows: 1.2 meters from the rear and side lot lines, 3 meters from any dwelling, 1.5 meter from any structure, and that all other setbacks remain the same, and that settlement area be defined as per the township zoning bylaw.
Okay, all those in favor? That is carried. Can I have a mover and seconder for the yard cleanliness and health and safety provisions? Deputy Mayor Coughlin and Councillor Cabral. That council approve the recommendations provided by staff in regards to regulations for yard cleanliness and health and safety at the September 28th Backyard Chicken Licensing Workshop, and that the recommendations be included in the draft licensing bylaw for council's consideration at the October 20 regular meeting. Comments, questions? I have a comment. So where do we address satisfactory winterization of these chickens? Or do we? Deputy Clerk Helmke?
Thank you, Mayor Allen. We don't go into specifics regarding winterization. We just say that the hens need to have a heat source and that the coop needs to be a weatherproof, ventilated structure. And I believe that was under coop regulations. Let me go back to one of the slides here. So yes, going back to coop regulations on slide number 15, it says all backyard chicken hen coops shall be fully enclosed weatherproof structure or enclosure built to prevent any rodents from harboring underneath, so on and so forth. And then we also will include in there that there needs to be proper ventilation and a heat source. And the heat source needs to be meet manufacturer's instructions, and that it has to be a CSA rated product.
Okay, any other comments on this motion? All those in favor? It is carried. Okay. Can I have a mover and a seconder to confirm and adopt proceedings, please? Councillor Moore and Councillor Cabral. The bylaw 2020-071 to confirm and adopt the proceedings of council at the special meeting held on September 28, 2020, listed herein, be signed and sealed by the mayor and clerk. All those in favor? Carried. And just before adjournment, thank you, council, for good discussion, good debate, and for Mr. Dam and Deputy Clerk and Clerk for good reports, good information. And Councillor Ritchie.
Mayor Allen, I had a question to Mr. Dam, if he's still available.
He is. Go ahead.
What's the life expectancy of a chicken?
Until it gets eaten. But no, but a laying hen, like, she'll live.
I didn't hear that.
3, 4, 5 years. Toward the end, she won't be laying any eggs, though. At that point, she's just a pet, pretty much at that point. But and depending upon the breed, like some breeds are longer lived than that. So yeah, it's this. You could have someone starting a 3-year pilot project with the same hens, start to finish.
Thank you.
Okay.
You for coming.
Can I have a mover and a seconder for the adjournment, please? Councillor Ma and Councillor Moore, that the special meeting of the Township of Springwater is now adjourned at 6:20 p.m. to meet again in regular meeting on October 7, 2020 at 6:30 p.m. in the Council Chambers, Administration Center, Minising. All those in favor? That is carried. And again, thank you.